What if the loudest thing in your life is the thing you're trying the hardest not to hear? Hello and welcome to the Zach Brown Show, the show that introduces you to old friends, one story at a time. I'm your host, Zach Brown. On this episode, I talk with Jeremy Stein, host of Main Street Magic and author of Still Loud, Now Clear. We talk about his journey through addiction, the illusion of control, and what it looks like to become present in your life once again. All that and more coming up. Well, Jeremy, thanks for coming and hanging out with me today.
Man, thank you, Zach. I'm so excited to catch up and talk with you today. I appreciate it.
You bet. So, you're here to talk about your book, and I really want to hear your thoughts, but let's kind of back up the 30,000 foot view before you talk about your book. For my friends, our listeners that haven't met you yet through your Disney content, your blogs, whatever, tell us about Main Street Magic and just kind of all the little things that you're doing.
Yeah, of course. So my wife and I started Main Street Magic podcast. It's been, 8 years now. This will be our 9th year of doing it.
That's awesome.
And, it was one of those things that was really born out of us almost being tired of everyone asking us how to do Disney. We became pass holders a decade ago. We were going all the time. Since we became pass holders a decade ago, we have visited every single month without missing it. That included technically April of 2020 when the parks were shut down. My wife and I drove down on our anniversary and we packed a lunch and we drove where roads were open behind
Nice.
Magic Kingdom, and we pulled over and we had lunch. And so, it's one of those things, you start getting home from these trips and everybody's hitting us up and they're saying, where do I stay? Where do I eat? What's the best way to save money? And I had produced podcasts for my brother for years and years in the basketball space.
Okay.
So I knew how to do a podcast. I knew how to produce one, but I had never fronted one. And so I was like, well, let's just do that. And then when somebody asks us, we can send them in the direction of the podcast. And if it turns into, a little bit of a business or something more, then bonus points for us. So we have, we do 2 episodes a week.
Wow.
And we've done that the entire length of the show, which is very hard to keep up with. I don't recommend it to anyone. But we have a blast doing it, and we have been fortunate enough to build a really cool community, meet some absolutely amazing people. That's really, the podcast is what led me to meeting you at, Lou Mangello's Momentum Conference and all. So it's been a really, really cool journey, and we're just excited to see where it continues to go and how we continue to grow.
That's beautiful. I love when something, I think the best things are really, they're born out of necessity. They're born out of those people keep asking about this, or people keep saying this, and you go, I see a need, I hear a need, and I'm going to answer. So I just love that.
Yeah, for sure. And my brother's always said, a lot of people say this, but you take what you love, you take what you're good at, and wherever those two things intersect is what you should do.
Yep.
And I was good at producing podcasts. I love Disney. And it was like, all right, let's put them together and let's see what happens. So we've hopefully created some magic.
I love it. Now, something that we also have in common is the music realm. And so I just want to kind of sit in that space for a second. Tell me about some of your early musical influences, like people that you saw that you're like, I want to do that. I want to be like that guy.
Yeah. So it's so funny because my brother's 3.5 years older than me. And so I think, like any little brother growing up, I put myself in his shadow. Like, it's not that anybody else did, but it's hard not to look up to your older brother who, mine was smart. He's still all these things, but he was them back then too. He's smart, good looking. He, great personality, great at sports. He excelled at every sport he played. And so, I'm just the little brother kind of looking up at him like, man, I want to be all those things. And so somewhere along the line, he took up listening to hardcore rap. So young Jeremy Stein in middle school and getting ready to enter high school was listening to NWA and Ice Cube and the Ghetto Boys, and all these hardcore rap artists and stuff. And then my brother went away to college. I was still in high school. And that's when all of a sudden it was like, hey, he's gone. I don't really know who to look up to. He went to school about 6 hours away in North Carolina. We were living in Maryland. And so my friend group and just the way that my life started to change in it was like 1998, when I would have been a sophomore in high school, it started gearing me towards, the grunge genre
Yep.
that was popular then with Nirvana. And this was right after Kurt Cobain had passed away, but,
Wow.
Nirvana and Pearl Jam. The first CD I bought when they came in those huge cardboard boxes
Yep.
was the Offspring Smash. And the Offspring was the first concert I ever went to when I was 15 years old with a bunch of friends. My dad took us. So he went and saw the Offspring as well with us. And so I kind of started to get embedded in this like grunge, genre and time in my life. I was hitting the Goodwill stores and wearing the corduroy pants and the flannel shirts and growing my hair long. And,
Yeah.
me and buddies started the late 90s, early 2000s garage band.
Yep.
Like, so many kids did at that time. And I started to just connect so much with music.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it wasn't as much the lyrics, because when you go back and you listen to those lyrics, they don't tell the same story the way that a lot of artists and lyrics are today.
Yeah.
Where they paint the picture so much more clearly. When you go back and you look at the lyrics from Kurt Cobain and Eddie Vedder and some of these guys, I wasn't a 17-year-old kid connecting with them, but I knew how the music made me feel.
Yeah.
And that was a certain way that I could feel the music, and it was just what I consumed all my time with, was listening to music and going to shows. In high school, I was going to concerts 4 or 5 times a month at least.
Wow.
With friends, seeing all these different bands, going to the festivals, during the summertime and spending all day listening to music and just connecting with folks. And then as I got into college, went through, the needed heartbreak and things like that. That's when I really started connecting with some of these bands and their lyrics. Bands like Creed, Stabbing Westward, those were the ones where I could hear a song and be like, that's how I feel. I had no idea how to say it, but that's exactly what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool when you can connect with something like that, whether it's music, a movie, a book, a show, whatever it may be. So I just latched onto music as much as I could and have continued to ever since. I put my own guitar down a long time ago, but yeah, music is such a huge part and influence in my life.
Yeah. Music has this amazing way of communicating what we feel. Sometimes it's other people's words to communicate when we don't have the words, or even if it's an instrumental, you're like, this is communicating how I'm feeling. I love how you said that. It's just, you resonate. You're like, I'm feeling that, whether it's angst or rage or heartbreak or joy. It's that whole palette of emotions that the music takes you through. And, that's a heavy, heavy theme in your book, which I want to kind of start sliding into that a little bit, talking about your early influences, in your family and from your brother. You talk how your home was, you were pretty like normal household, and it wasn't like anything crazy or terrible, but with your parents, there was kind of an emotional disconnect, like things weren't really like discussed or kind of shared.
Yeah.
Do you feel that music really like carried you through those spaces when you're like, I kind of don't know what to feel about this because I'm not having conversations about it?
Yeah, completely. It was, I have, grew up with some of the best parents I could ask for. They always provided what we needed, a lot of times provided what we wanted, but our home was just kind of always a safe space of, in almost, and not the traditional like safe space terms. It was a safe space where we didn't talk about emotions and politics and religion and sex and drugs and, the things that were hard. So I didn't really learn how to express myself or feel those things.
Yeah.
Honesty when it came to negativity just really wasn't a thing. And so, when I was, dating my first girlfriend through high school, and we broke up right before I went off to college, and I'm heartbroken, like every 18-year-old kid who's been broken up with. That's where I was able to turn to music. And like you said, I could go, man, that's what I'm feeling. And even if I'm in my car or I'm in my dorm room with my headphones on and I'm kind of belting out these lyrics, it's saying what I want to say, but I never felt like I had anyone to say it to. You know, it's interesting when you write a book like this, because it makes you go back and look at your entire life, and you can realize where you had it so good.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it wasn't that my parents said, don't talk about these things. We just didn't. So I didn't feel comfortable talking about them.
Yeah.
Same with my friends. I had the best group of friends imaginable. A lot of them from my childhood are still my best friends today, which doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
You know, I've known some of these people for 30 and 40 years. And there'd be the moments where you get a little deep and you get a little serious. But again, when I was never really brought up or almost taught how to, you know, do that with other folks, I just buried it inside.
Yeah.
And music was my outlet, you know, and in my mind too, I think, you know, I had the dorm room and I went and I printed out lyrics to all these songs, and my half of the dorm room was floor to ceiling lyrics.
Yeah.
From, you know, the Stabbing Westwards and Creeds and Pearl Jams and, you know, all these bands back then. And in my mind, it was like, if you want to know how I feel, this is it.
Yeah.
You know, so even if I didn't have those deep conversations, it was that outlet, and it was kind of that release for me.
Yeah.
And it certainly carried me through so many moments. And, you know, while I was much younger, maybe not understanding the lyrics and just loving the way the music made me feel, I got to that point where the words started to really carry and started to mean something to me.
Yeah.
And again, I've just carried that until now. You know, there's a new song comes out now and I can hear it and be like, man, that's exactly what I'm feeling, good or bad, you know. And what I found with music too is that the lyrics often will follow you through your life, but they may change meaning.
Yep.
So something that I listened to 30 years ago that brought me to tears now brings me joy in a very different way.
Yeah.
Whether the lyrics themselves have a different meaning, or the way that I can look back and go, I don't feel that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually makes me happy. I still love this song, and I still can go back and remember those moments that I felt this, but I don't now. And that actually brings me joy a lot of the time.
I love that. That's so great. I've talked about this before about music. I think it's absolutely impossible for us to ever hear a song the same way twice, because we've had new successes, new failures, new hopes. You know, we've eaten new foods, we've seen new movies, whatever. We are a different person than we were the last time. And so, like you're saying, the thing that could have made you weep, now you're like, that makes me laugh. Or before, a song that you're like, this brought me such joy, is now very painful. It's amazing how that particular art form, it's so fluid. Like, it's just this shifting mist in, you know, the world around us. You know, you talked about, you know, this, it gave you language, you know, where you didn't feel that you had language at home that you were taught, like the music taught you language. How much of addiction would you say is really about not having language?
You know, I think for me personally, a lot, you know, because when I was feeling something that I felt like I couldn't feel, or I didn't know have the words for, or I didn't know how to handle, that's where alcohol filled that space for me, you know? So, you know, and I think there's some other things. I do think that part of, you know, when I went to college, I did a year at community college near home, and then I went to Towson University. And, you know, the only time we had kind of a serious talk, my dad was driving me up, and it wasn't about sex or drugs or alcohol specifically, but he said, again, amazing parents that were paying for my ride. I was never going to take out a student loan, which is incredible at the time. And, you know, it's one of those things I can look back and be like, dang it, I really had it easy. But, you know, he said, if you fail one class, we're going to pull you out.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, well, I don't really know what that means. So I got there, and, you know, we didn't have the discussions about drugs and alcohol. I knew that, you know, you weren't supposed to drink a bunch of it, but what did I do when I got to college? I drank a bunch of it, and I went crazy. And I think that's what kind of started it. You know, that was almost like lighting the match, but then not having a way to express myself, or knowing how to express myself, or just not wanting to feel these feelings. You know, when I grew up not seeing my parents often feel feelings, you know, in the first 40 years of my life, I saw my dad cry twice.
Wow.
That was the death of his best friend, and I think the death of his father. So I'm like, well, I don't want to show this stuff.
Yeah.
So how do I mask it? How do I bury it? So going away and being away from my parents and getting into a college environment lit that match. And then it was like not knowing to do with what to do with my feelings and all was kind of like the gasoline that I just threw on it.
Yeah.
And so whether, it got to that point where it was, all right, I'm at college, so I'm going to drink. But then as I got pulled out because I went ahead and failed the classes, like my dad said, and he kept up with his end of the bargain. So I only went one semester. And, I went home. I lived for basically another semester, and then I moved back out when I was 19 years old. I moved out of my parents' house and went and moved in with my college girlfriend. But yeah, again, I think it was just, I'm happy, so we celebrate and we drink. I'm sad. I don't want to feel this, so I'm going to numb it. So I'm going to drink.
Yeah.
And when I got to Towson for that semester, again, feeling like I had always lived in my brother's shadow, who I wasn't as successful at sports. I was as smart, but I didn't apply myself. I didn't have the motivation to apply myself in the same way.
Yeah.
I can say he's better looking than me, so I felt like I lived in this shadow. And so I got to college, and next thing I knew, like, people knew me. Now, I don't know if it was for the right reasons. Often it was heading to class the next day and somebody being like, "Hey, Jeremy, what's up?" And I'm thinking, I don't really remember this person because we were out partying last night.
Yeah.
But I felt all of a sudden this validation that I hadn't really felt before. And I think that's what continued to drive me even further, even when I wasn't in college, And then for the next year, 2 years, almost 3 years that I dated the same girl, and I was still living in that environment. So I wasn't going to school, but I was living with and around and hanging out with people that were still in that same environment.
Yeah.
The only real difference was, they knew how to kind of turn off that alcohol faucet when they had a big test the next day or they had something important, and I just didn't. And, from that point, alcohol started to become a daily fixture of my life, no matter what. It wasn't an everyday thing at that point. It was still a lot of times to the weekends. But once I broke up, or that girl broke up with me as well, wasn't great at relationships to start with, if you haven't picked up. But, and then I moved in with an old high school buddy who played music. And then we started going out and playing music.
Yeah.
And I felt that validation again. We were going to bars almost every night. We were hosting open mic nights. We were getting up in front of people. We became known, like the ones that would close out the night. I would drink enough and I would get up there and sing and do songs. And again, that validation was so incredible for me that it was kind of its own separate high, and the only way that I thought I knew how to get there was through alcohol.
Yeah.
It's the only way that I knew to be personable, to get out there, to bury the feelings I didn't want to feel, and be the person that I thought I wanted to be.
It's interesting, and I'm, just sitting here listening to your story and, reading through the book, and it's amazing, being at a place where for so long you weren't shown how to communicate your feelings. You were figuring out how to engage with emotions through alcohol, through all these things. And now on this side of your story, you say in your book, if it feels uncomfortable, that means I'm finally telling it right. So the fact that you're on this side of the story and saying, I'm going to here it is. Like, I'm going to be so vulnerable and tell you my story, take it for what it is, but you're just sharing your experience and hoping to help others, not in a preachy way, but just here's my story. And so I so appreciate that about you. I celebrate you as a man, doing this, not hiding behind those emotions, just being real. And man, there's some really heavy moments in this story early on. I mean, these bait and switch moments from one moment when you're sitting on a bed laughing it up with your buddy to really heavy stuff. If you could walk us through, just your relationship with Billy and kind of what happened with that.
Yeah. So I got to Towson, and the way it was set up, there were two main towers that were dorms, and you had a suite mate, who was my best friend, Matt, who I had known since 7th grade. He's still my best friend today. He's I text with him every day. You know, we don't see each other much because he's still back up north and I'm down in Florida. But so he was my suite mate. We had a shared bathroom, and then you had other suite mates on the other side. And they were those three that were in that room were great. They definitely helped with kind of that college party lifestyle. But next to them was Billy, and Billy was one of those types of folks that, you know, I met him when I got to Towson, and I got there in August, and within, you know, a week or two, he was somebody that you gravitated towards. He was that shining light. He was the one with the big smile. And I would sit in my room and I'd play guitar. Often I had just learned Good Riddance by Green Day at the time. And so I would play it with my door propped open because I'm looking for that validation of somebody to stop in and be like, hey, who's playing guitar?
Yep.
And so Billy would come in anytime he walked by, and he would either sit on the bed next to me or he'd stand at the doorway and he'd kind of sing along to it. And just, you know, he was somebody, again, that as soon as I met, you're thinking, how do you get to be like that happy and that outgoing, you know, as I'm struggling to figure out who I am. And he just seemed like he knew who he was. And then in October of that year, I remember we were at the mall, at the Towson Town Mall, this one night, and I might've been there with Matt, and we ran into Billy and his roommate, and we were talking and sharing stories, and Billy was sharing this story about drinking the past weekend, and he got sick and threw up in front of people, and we're all just laughing, you know. I mean, we're a bunch of 18-year-olds at the time, just having the time of our lives. Yeah. Like, and then the next day, I was actually my girlfriend, who were co-ed dorm rooms, and I'm right across the hall in my girlfriend's room. And Billy, and this actually just came to me that I had forgot, Billy had dated her roommate as well. And we hear screams and yells coming from his roommate. And I run out to see what's going on. And his roommate had just come home and found that Billy had hung himself in his closet in the dorm room. And so people are slowly starting to kind of come out and hear what's happening, and frantic. So I jetted downstairs as quick as I could, started looking for, you know, either counselors that are there on site or running outside to find security or police, you know, whatever we can do to get somebody up there, you know, and he had already unfortunately passed. So there was nothing that they could do.
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden it's like your whole life is just thrown into a blender. You know, and you go from being so like happy and carefree to thinking, what on earth just happened?
Yeah.
You know, because we're talking late 90s, you know, nobody talked about mental health.
Right.
You certainly didn't talk about mental health if you were a man. I mean, you know, that a lot you were looked at as weak. Or at least, again, this is how I felt growing up. And so you're just sitting there thinking, like, what could possibly have been going on for him to want to do this and for this to occur? And it would have been, I mean, I had attended, you know, the funeral of my grandfather, one of them, because the other grandfather passed. I was 3 years old. I didn't even go to it. You know, somebody stayed back with me.
Sure.
And so I had never experienced really loss in my life. I'd been really fortunate. And so they were going to have the funeral, and I knew I had to go. I wanted to be there. But it was like, man, if I go home, like, I don't know if I'm going to come back.
Yeah.
So I didn't go home, you know, and I certainly didn't have a suit. I certainly didn't have anything packed in my room that was, you know, preparing me for a funeral.
Yeah.
And I borrowed pieces from people. You know, I got some clothes from all different types of people, and I put together something. And we went in there, and it was just so surreal. And it was the moment that I realized, like, holy crap, like, people feel this way. Everybody feels something that you don't know about.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that I would eventually feel in my life of addiction and alcoholism is you always think like you're the only one.
Yep.
You know, like, because if nobody's talking about it, you think you're, and that's another thing that kept things hidden. I'm thinking, I'm the only one that's feeling these things. I'm the only one that is, you know, just waiting for that phone call from my girlfriend. And I'm just so downtrodden, and my life is this and that. And then you start to open up and realize, like, no, this is not just me.
Yeah.
There's other people, and there's other people that aren't speaking about it either. And it was one of those things that instead of facing the music and, maybe trying to open up myself or talk to somebody about it or go to some sort of grief counseling, it was just, I'll just continue to bury it. I don't like these feelings.
Yeah.
They're bad. So what's the one thing that numbs them? Alcohol.
Yeah.
And so I just continued to, pour on top of almost a full glass. And it was definitely something that stuck with me for a long time. And I believe even more now, since getting sober, I believe in God winks. And Billy passed away on October 29th. And this would have been 1998. And I swear to you, for several times after that, I would be somewhere and I would hear on the radio, Good Riddance by Green Day. And I would realize the date and it would be October 29th.
It's wild.
And this is before Spotify and iTunes, where I could say, let me just put it on. This is Billy's day. And it's so strange the way that those things work. And those connections work. But yeah, it was definitely something that I don't think I realized at the time the effect it had on me, because again, I just didn't take the time to face it.
Yeah. You said in your book that you're like, you got to the place where you said the lie wasn't I'm fine. It was I'm in control. What was the point when that narrative really took root in your life?
I don't know, because every time that I started to think I wasn't in control, I found the excuses to tell myself I was, because I would say to myself, like, this is BS. Like a liquid doesn't control you. You control it. And I always thought that I wanted alcohol. I never thought I needed it. I thought it was something that I was making the conscious choice to drink. And I don't think I really started to realize it was the other way around until 2 or 3 years before I finally clicked the switch and got sober for good. So a lot of that time I just felt like I was in control. And the biggest liar is not drinking for like one night or during one thing.
Yeah.
Because then my mind told me you are in control. You didn't drink last night. You wanted to, and you didn't. So guess what? You must be in control.
Yeah.
Which therefore means you're fine. And so that was just the lie that I continually told myself, is that I was the one who was holding the cards. I was the one who could choose whether to drink or not. And what I ended up learning is, the only thing that I truly was in control of was the first drink. Because after that, it was over. Yeah. And I didn't have control over anything else. And one of the things I remember hearing someone tell me that I thought was just brilliant and kind of beautiful, if you get hit by a train, it's not the caboose that kills you, right? It's that first car.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's what alcohol was for me and still is and will always be. So it's the decision to not take that first one. But also for me, it was the constant mind games of telling myself, well, I'm in control. I'm choosing to take this first drink. But then once I did, it was all over.
Yeah.
Whatever it is kicks in, and that's the end of it. And then I would wake up the next morning and tell myself the same lie. And then you just constantly repeat that cycle until you find a way to break it.
And now a word from our sponsors. Hey listener, if you've been enjoying the show and want to be a bigger part of what we're building here, I'd love to invite you to join the Patreon. It's a great way to support the podcast, and in return, you get access to some fun stuff like behind-the-scenes updates, bonus content, and even some one-of-a-kind swag like stickers, buttons, and a members-only t-shirt. It helps keep the lights on around here, the conversations flowing, and making this thing something special. So if you're in, come grab your spot. From the balcony to the VIP lounge, each tier brings you deeper into the world of the show. Just head to patreon.com/The Zach Brown Show. I'll see you on the inside. I told you I wouldn't be gone too long. Let's continue the conversation. So through your book, you take us on this journey of fatherhood,
Mhm.
which is really special. It's a beautiful thing. The contrast between how you were raised and how you're raising, your family. And you say this thing that, Jeremy, really just stuck with me, that you said that you were there, but you weren't fully present.
Mhm.
What does this realization do to you as a father?
It hurts, man. There's, again, to tie it back to music, Blue October, who probably is currently my favorite band, lead singer Justin Furstenfeld went through a lot of struggles with addiction to, not only alcohol, but drugs. And his, to a point where his daughter was taken from him and he lost custody of her.
Hmm.
And there's a line in a song they have called The Worry List where he says, "I might have been gone, but I never walked out." And for so many years, while I was still drinking, as a parent, that line always hit me because I felt that way. I'm like, I knew that I wasn't always mentally there for them. And, I was always thinking about what else was going on. I never lived in the present moment when I was drinking
Hmm.
because I was always thinking about my next drink, or how do I hide this drink, or how do I, mask this? How do I mask that? And so it really took getting sober and looking back and realizing, like, yes, I was there physically because on the surface, I was a wonderful, wonderful father. I was there for the homework. I was there for, once I started working from home, I could go and meet them for lunch once a week. I could, go to the class projects and parties, and I was there for the games and the gymnastics and all of that. But just because I was physically there, I know I wasn't mentally there because my mind was in
Hmm.
such a mess and in such a fog that it's hard to go back and really remember those moments for being a father in the moment. It was,
Yeah.
I was just always trying to get to whatever was next and not just being there.
Hmm.
And that's really hard to come to a realization to, especially because when I got sober, they were 13 and 16 years old. That's a lot of my
Yeah.
kids' lives that I was in that active addiction and drinking through. And,
Hmm.
even when I first became a father, it was trying to navigate how to do that because for 4 nights a week, I was almost like a single father because my wife Rhonda is a hairdresser.
Okay.
And works very, very long hours. So 3 to 4 days a week, she's working from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. So I was still working a full-time job in an office when our first daughter, Kaylin, was born. And I was, going into work, going into the office. I was getting off, picking her up from my in-laws' house, coming home, feeding, diaper, doing all this stuff, putting her to bed, feeling like a single
Yeah.
father. And again, I didn't know how to deal with that at the time. And I know it sounds kind of all woe is me because that's what every single person goes through when they have a child in very different scenarios.
Sure.
But it was me going through it and I didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so often that was the times that I turned to drinking as well. And I look back now and I remember priding ourselves almost on being like, we're going to have children because we both really wanted them and love them more than anything. But we're not going to let them affect our lives the way we see our friends. We're not going to be the ones that say, no, we can't come over and watch the football game on Sunday because our daughter has to take a nap at 2 p.m.
Right.
We were the type to say, we're going to take our daughter, we're going to take a pack and play, and we're going to ask if we can put her in the other room. And, looking back, I realized how selfish that was,
Hmm.
because it didn't make us the cool parents. It, to me now, when I look back, it feels very irresponsible.
Hmm.
It feels like, what could, and I've got to think now about how I have parented compared to how my parents parented and what my kids might be saying 30 years from now if they sit down on a podcast.
Yeah.
And it's hard to not let that constantly be in your head. But I'm proud of the fact that I never was physically gone, that I didn't just say I can't handle this and I'm out or any of that, because I love those girls more than anything in the world. But now I get to be truly present with them. Like when
Yeah.
I'm there, man. I'm not thinking about what's next. I'm not thinking about the drink. I'm not drunk or buzzed. We we used to always say, and again, Kaylin would have been 16 when I got sober, but prior to that, we'd say, hey, if you're ever somewhere, and I think a lot of parents say this to their kids, if you're ever somewhere and you find out that you're having a drink or somebody pressures you or whatever, you call me and we'll come pick you up. Well, guess what, man? Over 2 years ago, she could have called me and I wouldn't have been there for her because I couldn't have driven,
Yeah.
And like now I can say that to her at 18 years old when I know that that's a space she's going to have to start navigating. And I can say to her, if you or any one of your friends, give every one of your friends my phone number too. And if any of you ever find yourself in a spot where you need someone to come get you, I will come get you. And I can promise it because that's I will awesome. Not be drunk or buzzed or anything.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the best way I think I can compare what it feels like to go from that stage of alcoholism to where I'm at now and being sober.
Yeah. Just hearing, you walk through that. Do you look back at those Blue October lyrics now and see them differently? Like, did you possibly look at them before as kind of like this, that's right, I never worked out or never walked out, but now is it maybe like there's a bit of conviction behind that where it's like, ooh, like I wasn't present in that moment, but I could have been. Like, do the lyrics mean different things for you now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do, and it's cool because, Blue October and the journey that I've taken with them was like we were talking about with the way that the lyrics change. I went from wanting what their lead singer Justin has, and he's got about 13 years of sobriety under his belt. And awesome. I remember hearing lyrics like that and other lyrics in the song going, and plenty of other songs like, that's what I want. I want that, but I can't get there. I don't know how. And now I can go back and listen to them and I can really feel them in a different way. Yeah. There's a story in the book that was a huge change. And, in the book covers really the first 18 months of sobriety where I pretty much white knuckled it. I was stubborn. I was stupid the same way I was for most of my life. And I didn't seek any sort of help outside of myself, which was really, really hard, because all I did was remove the alcohol from my life. I didn't change anything else. And I didn't look inward to do the work on myself that I needed to.
That's good.
And so we were at, I think it was like day 460, something like that. And Blue October was doing this tour called Argue with the Tree. It's a live album they had done a long time ago. And they were basically going to go back out. They were going to play the full live album. And then they were going to play another half of the set, basically, with more modern stuff and some of the newer things. So no opening band, just Blue October for like 3 hours. And they're from Texas and they were playing a show in Austin, Texas, where one of my best friends and her husband moved about a year before. And so it was one of those times where I kind of just bought the tickets and then told Rhonda, like, oh, by the way, like, I bought these tickets. We got to go to Austin, Texas. So we go out to Austin and we spend time with our friends Lucy and Caleb. And then on the last night, it's going to be the show. And it is in like the middle of the city. It's called Moody Amphitheater. If you ever get a chance to see a show there, it's amazing.
Okay.
Like it's now they had set out some seats, but it can be an open, venue, unseated if it wants. But it's like in the middle of downtown where you're looking around and there's skyscrapers, but there's also beautiful landscaping surrounding you.
That's cool.
And the only thing covered is the stage. And I was going to that like, this is going to be hard to get through these songs. I'm like 15 months sober. I'm still really, really struggling internally. I'm still not really being honest with people about the way I'm feeling. And I'm like, this is going to wreck me probably.
Yeah.
And so we're getting through the song. We get through the whole first set and, I'm connecting. I'm emotional. I'm tearing up at many of the songs.
Yeah.
And then they played The Worry List that I was telling you about, which is the song where his daughter was, about taken away from him and then getting custody back, basically going to pick her up. And I'm just singing at the top of my lungs. And at the end of that song, he looks off stage. His daughter's name is Blue. And he says, Blue, come on out.
Oh, wow.
And she runs out from the side of the stage. She's my daughter's age. She's maybe got 10 months or something, a year on my daughter. She's a little bit older. And she runs out and gives him this big hug. And all of a sudden, like something kind of clicked where I was like, this dude has been through everything, things I can't even imagine, his story is unbelievable. And here he is on stage with his daughter that he lost, that he wrote the line, I might've been gone, but I never walked out about, and they're smiling like they've made it. Like they
Yeah.
have made it through all of this together.
That's beautiful.
And it really just flipped a switch in me. And from that moment, every Blue October lyric started to feel different.
Yeah.
It started to feel more like an anthem,
Mhm.
and of celebration. And up until that moment, I was looking at Facebook memories every morning and I was getting sad and emotional because I would look at, a photo of me in the pool with both of the, each of the girls in each of my arms, and we're all smiling, but I could see like, hey, I can see it in my eyes
Mm.
that I was hurting and that I was struggling. Um, and I looked at them with sadness because I felt like I wasn't really there and I wasn't present.
Mm.
And from that moment, I was like, I don't have to look at them that way anymore.
Yeah.
Stop focusing on your eyes and focus on theirs.
Ooh, come
And
on.
in every last dang picture, they're smiling. They're happy
Yeah.
because they don't know what's going on inside of me. So for them, many of those moments don't even look the same way that they did to
Yeah.
me. They just know that they're in their dad's arms and he's there for them.
Yeah.
Even if I wasn't mentally. So that was such a pivotal moment in my sobriety, that started to change. And now I can listen to that song and yeah, it's like, it's an anthem.
I love that.
It's hey, I used to look at these songs and I used to look at Justin as this is what I want. And now I freaking got it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Oh man, that's great. Would you say that because of the lack of communication and kind of emotional intelligence, for lack of a more pedestrian word, that you had in your own house, do you feel that you really make that extra effort to have that communication and those discussions with your kids?
Yes, we do completely. They're two girls, two teenage girls,
Yeah.
who are very, very different from each other. And my wife Rhonda is incredible. She had a very, very open relationship with her mom. Her mom's her best friend. And she carried that into our marriage and into our parenting. And we have been open ever since, I started to get sober. There were certainly times where, they did know as they got older. Obviously, there are some moments that um, I, I was, I don't know if I was fortunate, I don't know what the word to use is. I was never a violent drunk. I was never abusive drunk or anything like that. I was I need to numb and dull everything I'm feeling type drunk. But there certainly were moments that I had to sit with them the next day when they're 10 and 12 years old and say, I'm sorry.
Mm.
I'm sorry for what I, said or did, or just passed out on the couch or embarrassed you in a way or whatever it may be last night, and we had those open conversations. And then when I got sober, we continued to have them. And it has been, it's been incredible and life-changing. And again, we'll see if it worked 30 years from now when they're sitting on the same podcast, when they're on the Zach Brown show and you're interviewing them, we'll see if they say the same things.
Yeah.
But we've always wanted to be very open. And it was funny. I was talking to my dad the other day, and it took me a very long time to tell him I got sober. Because I knew that would bring up a lot more.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to deal with that with them. I started getting honest in my life with Rhonda, with my kids, with my friends, but I didn't know how to do that to them because, my thing, because they always provided everything I needed and they continue to. If I had to get off with you right now and call my dad for anything, it would come my way.
That's awesome.
I know that, and so it's always been my fear of disappointing them.
Mm-hmm.
And while getting sober is a really, really good thing, I knew that meant they would have to realize and know how bad I had got. And I had gotten really, really bad. And so I had kind of held it. And so I was talking to my dad the other day and he was like, do your girls know what's going on? Like, do they know all about this? And I'm like, yeah, like, but he had to question that a little bit.
Yeah.
Which makes me think, if he had gone through the same things when I was a kid, I don't know that he would have been open about, sobriety or anything like that.
Yeah.
We probably just would have noticed a change, but not really known the reason. And I want to be as intentional with them as I can. And I'm doing my best to not feel like I'm making up for lost time. but it's hard not to feel that way.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to be present. I'm trying to be where my feet are. I'm trying to live in those moments that I have. And the biggest change that I've made probably with them is that I say yes now. I used to say no a lot. I used to say no to taking Lacey and her friend to Target after school on a Friday because that would take me away from my drinking.
Yeah.
And now I say yes. I used to say no to Kaylin wanting to show me a bunch of anime videos and tell me about them when I have no idea what the hell she's talking about. And now I say yes. And I'm intentional with it.
Yeah.
And it makes all the difference in the world. And I'm trying to do the same thing with all other areas of my life. Is I'm trying to be comfortable being uncomfortable, trying to get out of the comfort zone, whatever other cliche, phrases you want to throw out there. I'm trying to finally live those. And I'm finally starting to find a way to find my own joy in other people's joy, because I wasn't before. When I was drinking, I was selfish and it was me first. And I didn't find joy in other people's joy. And now I do. And it's awesome.
That's beautiful. We'll be right back after this short break.
The vacation you've been waiting for is finally here. Make memories that last a lifetime. Cliche travel commercial statement. The ultimate escape is just a phone call away. Call 555-B-BAY for a free vacation guide.
All right.
Babambaboo Bay, a vacation like no other.
This show is sponsored by Thousand Circles, where we believe in the still moments. The ones between the fireworks, the ones that most people rush past. A lantern overhead at Katsura Grill, a quiet corner of a park, briefly yours alone. The hush of a lobby at sunrise, flowers in bloom, light pouring in. These images aren't just photographs, they're reflections of where we've been and the stories that shaped us. And now you can bring those stories home as posters, canvases, or aluminum prints. Beautifully crafted pieces that blend into your space but speak straight to your heart. It's a subtle celebration of fandom for an aesthetic life, because each of us has our own story to tell. But when we bring them together, they form something more. 1,000 memories, 1,000 quiet joys, 1,000 circles round the sun. So take a breath, look closer, and bring a little light to your journey. ThousandCircles.com. Scenes from your happy place. Sorry for the delay. I locked myself out. We can continue now. To bring it back to Blue October again, you tell in your book you're at Epcot one night. They always do their different concert series, and it's a really great way for people to get to see some of their bands for basically no money if you have your, annual pass. So tell us about that night of seeing Blue October at Epcot.
Yeah. So, it's funny that to go back a little bit, I remember I moved down to Florida in 2005,
okay.
Which was, it was that year. It might've been the year before. Actually, it was right around the year after. I'm sorry. It was 2006 that Blue October's album Foiled came out, which had their one true hit, Hate Me, on it. Most people go, I don't know who Blue October is. And then you press play on Hate Me and they go, oh yeah, I've heard that song. So I remember hearing them then and being like, man, this is good. And I listened to that album all the time. And then I just kind of took a break. I didn't really listen to them. And so I saw a Garden Rocks series. Actually, it was back when they, prior to COVID, they tended to do the Food and Wine Festival. And so that was coming up. And I was like, hey, Rhonda, there's this band, Blue October. I remember they had some really good songs. Let's go see them. We went and saw them from the first note. And when he walked out on stage in that band, I was like, oh, God, I am hooked. Like, this just became my favorite band in the world. And so I started diving in, and we started making it a yearly tradition that we would go see them at Epcot every year. COVID happened. They switched to doing garden rocks. We go to one of the shows and I'm drinking, you know, I'd gotten in the point where I was starting to take alcohol into the parks and I was hiding it in water bottles, you know, and again, in my mind, this is financially responsible, right? I don't have to buy as many drinks.
The justification.
But I'm looking at every chance I can to sneak those sips. Yeah. And so we're watching them and the songs are hitting, you know, they are just hitting me.
Yeah. And
I'm singing along and I'm taking more sips. And afterwards, I'm sure we're getting more drinks, but I'm now at the point where I'm, you know, kind of stumbling to the front of the park. And we get out to the front of the park and I have to call an Uber because I'm the Uber guy. Rhonda doesn't even have the app on her phone. And I can't even figure out how to use the app. I'm in just such a fog. Both, I mean, you know, literally in my brain from the alcohol and just emotionally, you know, and Rhonda's there, obviously very, very frustrated as she should be. And she's like, sit down on the ground here. Give me your phone. I will figure out how to call this thing. And I'm sitting on the ground. I'm wearing a Main Street Magic shirt. And it hits me that, man, you know, in this day and age, all it takes is one person to go, look at this drunk idiot. I'm going to video him and put it on social. And there's Main Street Magic. Yeah. And then there's people going, hey, that's Jeremy from Main Street Magic. And, you know, understandably, because it's just the world we live in, nobody's going to see that and be like, man, I wonder what's going on in his life. Yeah. They're going to see it and be like, what a drunken buffoon. Yeah. And that was a moment that could have ruined everything for us in the podcast. Yeah. And all of that. All it would have, you know, took was somebody noticing and somebody filming or taking a photo or whatever it may be. Yep. And you know the way that could spread like wildfire. And that's, you know, something now that I've learned to deal with, and I found my ways to look back on that. But for so long, I looked at it in a very different light, you know, and it was always the what if, and that what if would plague me. It wasn't enough at the moment to get me on the straight and narrow, but it was I use this metaphor in the book about the TikTok trend where people were putting watermelons around or rubber bands around watermelons until the watermelon exploded, right? Just enough. And that was my life for those last several years, was those rubber band moments. Yeah. It was that night of Blue October. That was just one more rubber band around the watermelon. And luckily enough for me, that wasn't the one that exploded the watermelon in my life. But I just kept stacking them on top through the next 2 or 3 years until I got to a moment where I was like, hey, one more and this thing explodes and your whole life explodes with it.
Yeah. And I'm just, you know, as a creator, reading your book and seeing that moment and obviously knowing Epcot in the front of the park, I'm able to so visualize that moment and see you sitting there and the panic that it genuinely caused me as I'm reading this. I was like, oh my gosh, like you said, if all it takes is that one video, that one share, because people unfortunately love a gotcha moment. They want to see, like, we love when people win, but for whatever reason, there's a whole group of people that love to see people crash and burn, and they're ready to share it with the masses, which is horrible. And I was like, oh my God, like by the grace of God, like you didn't have this moment where somebody was like, I know, you know, ruin this guy's brand. Like, that was that moment where, that very much could have been, you know, the rubber band that made the watermelon explode. So bring us to the moment, you know, another pivotal moment, potentially the pivotal moment when you're standing in your driveway and you kind of have epiphany.
Yeah, I remember standing there. We had to pressure wash the driveway because you have to do that all the time in Florida. And when you live in an HOA community, you got to do it even more often. Yep. So, you know, I remember standing out there. It was a Saturday morning. It was one of the rare weekends we were home. I think Rhonda was off at work and I'm pressure washing, and it was, I could feel something off in me. And for one of the first times, it wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Like I could feel almost the blood coursing through my veins. Wow. You know, and it's not like I was doing anything exciting. I wasn't running a marathon. I wasn't at a concert. It was, And I remember sitting back and being like, something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Something's really, really wrong. Um, I think that was the first moment that I started to realize that maybe I didn't have control. And the only way I knew how to stop that moment and move on from it was to drink. And I will never forget, this is when Bud Seltzer had just become big. The big seltzer craze was starting to come out. Everybody was making them, and we had this 24-ounce Bud Light seltzer in the garage fridge. And I remember going and grabbing it and taking a sip and feeling calm. And at the same time thinking, oh no.
Yeah.
Like this can't be the way that things are. This can't be who I am, because when the only medicine for what is, really hurting you and killing you is the same thing that is hurting you and killing you.
Yeah.
That's a bad sign.
Yeah.
And my medicine, my self-prescribed medicine was alcohol. And so every moment that I felt anything that wasn't just on a level playing field, that's where I turned to alcohol. And again, those are the ups, those are the downs. And I just remember in that moment, there was kind of another rubber band. But it was also, I think, the moment that the fear gripped me.
Yeah.
Because I knew the only way out was to stop completely. And I didn't see a life of mine without alcohol. At this moment, again, my oldest daughter's about 15 years old. And in my mind, I'm standing there thinking, what? I'm not going to have a drink on my daughter's wedding day? She's 15 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking ahead possibly 10 years and not being able to picture a life where I can't stand up and make a toast with an alcoholic beverage.
Yeah.
And that's really, really scary. But for me, what was even scarier was actually getting to that moment, was actually saying, I have to cut it all out. Because I had tried moderating. I had tried rules that I had set for myself. None of them ever worked. And every time I had even a small strand of sobriety, which if by my calculations in a 25-year period was 9 days that I had gone without drinking during that time. And you start to look at that and you're just like, alcohol was woven into every fabric of my life. Whether it was, the Friday night happy hours to going to concerts to all of a sudden Tuesdays when Rhonda works till 9 p.m. and I'm home and I'm bored and I don't know what to do with myself. That's where it started to become. And I just couldn't imagine a life without it. The life without alcohol felt scarier than the life with it at that time.
That's wild. So what was the thing? Like, what was the shift when you went from this feeling of this? It's kind of a mixture of clarity and fear that you're experiencing in this moment. What was the moment that you made that decision where you just basically said no more?
There's another. I'll give Cameron Whitcomb, who's a newer artist. He was actually on. Was it American? No, he was on American Idol. Didn't win, but he released his album The Hard Way just a couple months ago, and I was immediately drawn to him because I was already sober, but the algorithms, I'm listening to Spotify and the algorithms are like, this guy likes music about addiction. Let's give him Cameron Whitcomb. And he had, since he was 13 years old, was addicted to alcohol and drugs. He's 23 now. He's been sober. I think he celebrated 2-3 years now. And he has this line in a song. It says, I hate rock bottom, but I'm good at digging holes. And that was my life. There was no true rock bottom moment like you see in the movies and on TV, where you're in jail. It happens for plenty of people that they might want to call it. For me, there was no, I think, traditional sense of the word or definition rock bottom. It was constantly digging holes. And so there's moments like the Blue October night at Epcot. There's moments like standing in my driveway. Then there were the moments in late February and early March of 2024 where we went, Rhonda's brother and his wife and their 2 kids a couple years ago, they sold everything and they travel the country in an RV. And so he's still able to work full time from home or from RV, wherever they are. And they were back in town. We hadn't seen him in maybe a year and they were in Jacksonville. And so we're like, we're going to go up for the weekend. and we're gonna crash with them. The girls will stay in their camper. Rhonda and I have this little setup in the back of her 4Runner where we can car camp in it.
Nice.
And so we went up to see them. And the Friday night, and Rhonda's brother and I were, when I moved here, we were the type we'd hang out with a group of friends, and we'd drink and we'd have a good time and all. And but he had started to grow up, and I still hadn't. And so I remember the Saturday morning, he's cooking breakfast outside, and I'm sitting there, and I had the my Yeti, still had some drink in it from the night before, and I picked it up, and like clockwork, I was like, I'm gonna drink it. And I drank it. And, this is 9 a.m. or something at that point. And then I want to say I was always trying to be the good husband and the good father, but a lot of times that came at the expense of me figuring out ways to drink without anyone knowing.
Yeah.
So, or to almost have like my own gotcha moments maybe, or my own scorecard, where if something came up, I could say, well, you know what? I get you coffee every morning. Okay, who cares? So I thought, I'm going to be the good husband. I'm going to, kind of be the hidden alcoholic here. And I'm going to go up to the camp store and I'm going to get coffee for Rhonda. So I go up, and next to the free coffee, they've got the little airplane bottles of liquor that they're selling in the camp store. And I'm like, well, let me go ahead and get some. I grabbed the 99 bananas. I grabbed peanut butter whiskey, drank one of them on the walk back to the camper. And yeah, I mean, this is the point in my life where I'm, there's no mixers, there's no ice unless I'm in front of someone and I need to put on a show of I'm a normal drinker. Anytime other than that, I just wanted to get straight to the point that I wanted to get to as quick as possible. And so I'm walking back and I drink the 99 bananas, and then I've got the peanut butter whiskey in my pocket, and we go back to sit down, and they're doing breakfast still. And I go off again, an excuse of, hey, I got to get something out of the back of the truck. And I go back, and it's so weird how these moments are just clear as day. Yeah. I go to take off the top, and it's a metal top, and they got the little safety latch that sometimes won't come off all the way.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't get the top off. And I'm frustrated, and I put it back in my pocket, and I go sit down because I can't be gone too long.
Right.
Like, all right, well, I'll go to the bathroom. That's what I'll say I have to do. I go, I still can't get it off. So finally, I find myself tucked behind the 4Runner while everybody else is on the other side of it, cap in mouth with my teeth, trying to get that top off. And I finally get it off. I chug that right there behind the 4Runner, and I go back like everything's normal. And that's when they tell me, hey, all the kids, we got 4 kids with us, they want to go to this climbing place that's right around the corner. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound like something I want to do.
Yeah.
So I go on the website, I find it, and I look up, a lot of these places now have bars. And so I look it up. There's no bar. And I feel this panic set in.
Wow.
Like I have to go somewhere for 2 hours, maybe more, without alcohol available to me. And it started to click like this isn't right, man. Following weekend, we were going to the House of Mouse Expo that are put on by our friends Michelle and Scott Atwood of the Main Street Mouse. Mm-hmm. And we had gotten a booth for our podcast, but we also volunteer and help. Rhonda usually handles a lot of the talent, make sure that at their booths when they need to, if there's photo ops, I would fill in sometimes. And, if they didn't have somebody with them to help take money and all, I'd be doing that, or I'd be running around just doing whatever needs to get done. And I remember, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, I've got my hidden vodka bottle, and I take a sip of it. And then I remember we were like in the back stage, green room, whatever you call it area. And somebody else there was very stressed. Is like, man, I could go for a drink. And I'm like, I got a little something, and actually Rhonda said, Jeremy has some with him if you want some. And like, I remember feeling like, how dare you? Yeah. Like, you can't give away my alcohol, That night was the after party, which is not something I like being a part of. I thought I never knew how to be social without alcohol. So I didn't want to do things that were social unless I had alcohol. So we get to the party, and I head straight to the bar, cash bar, and I'm getting now just double straight whiskeys, not getting an old fashioned, not getting anything mixed. I'm like double straight whiskeys. Yeah. And then I find this point where somebody will just, I'll see Rhonda and immediately be like, oh yeah, it's just a regular, this is an old fashioned. Like I'm not even like I'm starting to just lie without even knowing
Yeah.
that I'm lying because I have to continue to hide this secret persona and this secret life that I'm living. So that weekend happens, and still it's like that other rubber band digging another hole. And then the following weekend, Lacey had a dance competition in Orlando. She was in middle school, 8th grade. She was doing dance, and this was the second year they got to go do dance at Disney. And we're at the competition and all. And again, I've got my vodka bottle. I've got my excuses. If Lacey isn't on that stage at that moment, I'm not going to be sitting in the room. I'm going to be somewhere figuring out a way I can get a drink in me. And then that night, one of the parents organized a big dinner for all the parents and the kids at Buffalo Wild Wings. And so again, I'm like, great, social time, and I don't like this. I'm not good at it. I don't want to be around these people. I don't want to get to know them. I don't want them to know who I am. So we get there and I order a Long Island iced tea because again, that's the quickest way I know how to get to where I am while still appearing normal on the outside. It's a common drink.
Yeah.
So I get 1 or 2, however many of those in me. And we go back and the parents are sitting by the pool. I'm loosening up some, but again, I'm playing these mental games and I'm, saying I have to go to the bathroom or I'm going to go get 1 drink and I'm ordering 2 and I'm drinking 1 before I ever get back.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there. It's probably 10 o'clock or something at night. And my Apple Watch goes off and it says high heartbeat for resting because I'm just sitting there. And Rhonda saw it and looked over and she's like, "What's your watch doing?" I'm like, "I don't know. It's probably just broken or something, And this moment then truly hit where I'm like, kind of like the driveway moment when I could feel my blood coursing through my veins. I'm like, this is going from mental to physical.
Yeah.
And that's not good. So we get up. I still had the drink in my hand. We went up to the room and something clicked. And I looked at Rhonda and said, "I have to get sober." And I had never said the word sober out loud. I had always said, I have to moderate. I have to slow down. I have to make rules. It was never, I have to get sober. And what I realized later, but not at the time, is that up until that moment, I was trying to get sober for everyone else. I was trying to get sober for Rhonda. I was trying to get sober for my kids. I was never trying to get sober for me. And whatever it was in that moment that clicked that night, it was, Jeremy, you have to get sober for you.
Yeah.
And I woke up the next morning and I remember laying in bed a little bit scared because I'm like, I said the word out loud. Oh no. Can I go back? But I also remember sitting there thinking, I had come to accept in the last year or two that I'd probably be dead by the time I was 50. I was 44 at the time. So I figured that alcohol in some way or another was probably going to kill me by the time I was 50. Most likely in a very horrific way, and I didn't want that. And I think that was the moment that it just finally clicked. Like, if you do not stop this now completely and face whatever it is that's going on in your life that you feel this is the only thing you can turn to, you're not going to be there for your kids anymore. I got in a point in that last year or two, I could, and this pretty much rules out every Disney movie. It was hard for me to watch a movie where a parent passed away because I looked at the sadness in the kids' eyes in that movie, TV show, whatever it was. And I saw that future for my own kids. And again, in that moment though, it wasn't about making sure that I was there for them in the future. I also wanted to be there for me.
Yeah.
Like 44 years old at the time. Hopefully I'm only less than halfway through my life if I haven't really screwed it up already. Like, I got a lot of life to live and I still have time to show these kids the father that I've always wanted to be, that I thought I was in my head. I'm fortunate to have Rhonda, who is one of the greatest human beings on the planet. She's my best friend and I get to call her my wife. We're celebrating 20 years next month of being married. She stuck through all of it. And it was just that, it was that moment. It clicked and something flipped the switch that said, if you don't do this now, you will never do it. And so I put on my big boy pants and we came home that Sunday and I sat down and said, all right, how do I be sober?
That's amazing. And I love that. I mean, I think it's obviously admirable to say, I'm doing this, for my wife, I'm doing this for my girls, but I just love the honesty of that, where you're just like, but I'm also doing this for me. You are saying to yourself and everyone else listening, I am valuable. And I finally am seeing that I am valuable. It's not this self-love movement or whatever that's out there, but you genuinely look saying, I am, I'm created. I have a purpose. I have the whole thing. You just are like, I'm worth it to me. And I think that's so cool to hear that, because I think there's people that will do things for other people, but not for themselves. And so I applaud you. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really, really amazing place that you arrived at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's, it's crazy because I go back and I look at how selfish I was when I was drinking, but it was the wrong kind of selfish. And now, I'm able to be selfish in caring about myself. You know what I mean? Like it's weird how that switch comes. It's like, I never knew that selfish can be positive depending on the way that you frame it.
Yep.
And so now, like you said, like selfishly, I'm thinking about my life and myself and what makes it the best it can be.
Yeah.
But I'm also allowing that now to have outside influence that I never did before. I didn't think that anybody else could help make me happy for so many years, because I lived so many years only making other people happy. The reason that my first 2 long-term relationships bombed was because all I did was try and make them happy. I didn't do anything for myself. I didn't do anything that made me happy.
Yeah.
I was getting the wrong joy from them to give me joy. And now I get the right joy. And it's amazing.
That's so powerful. We'll be right back after this short break. If you're like me, you probably wear clothes every day. You wake up and wonder, what am I going to wear today? Same old boring shirt as yesterday? No thanks. But don't worry, I've got you covered. You can order your very own Zac Brown t-shirt today. Visit the zacbrownshow-shop.fourthwall.com, or you can just check the show notes for a link. In addition to t-shirts, we've got other fun stuff like hats, stickers, mugs, and more. Get your Zac Brown Show gear only on fourthwall.com. Sorry for the delay. I locked myself out. We can continue now. Something that you did with this book that I just think is so great. I mean, for one, it's, this, like, if, give me get nerdy, like, I think it's great because it's a mental reset and it's the way you have it, but your different sections that you structured this book like a mixtape. Mm-hmm. And it's just such a fun idea. It's a really great way of bringing the reader in, but telling it through your particular brand. And I just love this. So how did you choose which songs match certain moments in your life?
So some of them just came to me immediately.
Okay.
There were some that I just had in my bank of music. It was funny. Our mutual friend Paul had posted something the other day about, like what song that can come on and you remember every lyric to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, every single song that was made in the 90s and 2000s, so I have this crazy mental bank. And so things immediately, I started first by taking the lyrics that I knew I wanted in the book and then building parts of the book around them. Mm-hmm. From there, once I kind of had that set, I had to go out and just find lyrics that matched. So, but I wanted to stay true to myself and true to things that I listened to.
Yeah.
So some of it was going out and being like, all right, what's kind of every song that I love that is about this? And let me go back and listen to them and see if something connects.
Yeah.
Some of it was just using the magic of the Spotify DJ. I would listen to the Spotify DJ while I was writing this book, like every moment of every day. And it would start to recommend other songs, a couple artists here and there. And that's how I found Cameron Whitcomb. And I'm like, oh, this connects. Like, this is exactly where I am right now.
Yeah.
And so I would start to pull that in. And then I just constantly went through refresh after refresh to try and find moments where, again, like I didn't have the words that I wanted to put in the book. Could I find the words that an artist or musician, a band, whatever it may be, can fill in that space?
Yeah.
There's like another kind of analogy I use in the book. My favorite TV show of all time is Scrubs. And Scrubs used music in such an incredible way where it was able to connect with an audience, I think sometimes when maybe the actors couldn't themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how what I wanted to also translate into this book is, I want to find the words that I can't find on my own, but somebody else has already been through this. And, most of the artists, not all of them, most of the artists in the book are sober or have had some sort of struggle or battle with addiction. So it made it very easy in a sense for them to kind of speak to me and for me in those. So yeah, while some, immediately, a huge line from Blue October in the song Light You Up is I'm never going to give up. Remember what abuse did. That's what I got tattooed here for my 1 year sober
Nice.
Anniversary. Like that's one where the moment I sat down to write the book, I'm like, where is this going? It's gotta be in here.
Yeah.
And then I kind of let some of the other ones come to me. And then there were a few that I kind of went and just searched for. I went and said, let me go back through, some of my favorite artists and let me see what I'm forgetting. And then there were moments like there's a Stabbing Westward song in here called Lies that traces back to my first girlfriend in a very specific night when I was struggling emotionally and mentally. And I can remember sitting in my car outside of Montgomery College, where I was doing my first year of junior college, listening to the song Lies. Like I can remember it like it was yesterday. I can picture it.
Yeah.
And so things like that, I found ways to work into the story.
Yeah.
Where at the beginning, I didn't think that might've been a pivotal moment in my life, but I remember it and I'm like, I love this song. I think it really resonates and connects. Let me find a way to now weave this into the overall story and structure of the book.
That's cool. The story serves the music serves the story. Is there a song that you would say that maybe during that season of life, and I know that's a very large season, that at the time you might have associated with struggle and now you kind of look at it from a place of like joy or peace?
Yeah. So I know I'm a broken record.
Go for it. Lead into it.
Bit, with Blue October, but I had to bring it up at some point.
Yep.
There's a song called Fear. And again, I think it's one that I used to look at in such a different way. Because in me, it was kind of like it was the fear of who I'd become, the fear of who I was going to be. And the fear that I could never get what somebody like Justin had. And I had quit listening to it for a little while when I first got sober because I couldn't. It was too emotional. It was too hard. And then when they played it that night in Austin, it started to take on new meaning.
That's cool.
And they actually ended up doing a documentary called Get Back Up. And Get Back Up is one of the lines from Fear. And that was one of those where, it's I used to fall, but now I get back up. And that started to resonate in such a different way because prior to getting sober, only the first half of that line was me. It was like, I used to fall and then I'd do it again and again and again. But now I can say I get back up. Funny enough, Justin does a solo tour every year. It's called Open Book Tour. And it's him and an acoustic guitar. And he tells stories and he plays music, their songs and all. And we're going to see it tonight in Jacksonville. And then we're going to see him again tomorrow night at House of Blues in Orlando. And after the shows, he is the type that he sets up a table outside and he will greet and sign whatever he can for every single person that's there. So one, I have a book for him that I'm hoping I can hand to him if I get the opportunity.
Nice.
And the other is I want him to sign my first proof copy with Get Back Up.
Oh man.
And I plan to get that tattooed. It's so weird. So I have this tattoo. Another one of their songs called I Want It has this incredible line that is everybody owns a scar to show us how we got this far. And so I was still in my drinking days, but I got a chance to meet him and I had him write out everybody owns a scar. And I got that tattooed on me, which was, again, at the time, that song meant something different.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, look at me, I'm troubled and I have this addiction and, I own these scars. And now I look at it because it does show you how far I've come, and how far I still have to go.
Yeah.
That's the thing too. This book is not the end of the Jeremy Stein sober journey. It really is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And so, if I get the opportunity, I'm hoping I can get him to write Get Back Up. And that's something that I can get tattooed. I got a spot for it here on my hand that I can look at every day, and know that, one, I got back up, and two, when I fail again, which I'm going to do in some form, I will still get back up. So yeah, it's so cool the way that music and those songs have grown with me.
Yeah.
And they'll just continue to keep growing.
Man, I love that. And I just so hope that you get this. If it happens, you got to let me know. Like, send me a message. I'll be so stoked for you.
Yes, I will. 100%.
So as a performer, this, all the music and the story, and like, if your book, if this soundtrack, if it was a concert presentation, what would be your encore song, the final song in the night, that the one that represents, how you're feeling and how you want people to walk away from this story? What's the song?
I think it would be I Want It by Blue October. And that line, everybody owns a scar to show us how we got this far, because for me now, my scars are my honesty. And, again, the way that I said saying yes now has carried me so far. Being honest has carried me so far.
Yeah.
I'm not hiding anymore. I don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. and think about the lies that I need to tell to cover up what may have happened the night before.
Yeah.
We're currently working on getting our taxes done. One of my favorite times of year is two independent people, because my wife's a hairdresser.
Yep.
and I'm my own business. And this moment hit me yesterday when she opened the closet doors in my office, because I didn't have a fear in me that she was going to find something that I didn't want her to find, like an empty bottle or whatever it may be. And I always had that fear before. And it's being honest about all of that, that has carried me. And again, those honesty are the scars.
Yeah.
It's telling the things, I got nothing to hide anymore. And I finally came to a point where I realized if I say something, like I said, in the book, if I say something uncomfortable, I'm finally telling it right. Because I always said the things that made me and everyone around me comfortable.
Yeah.
And, if we go out, probably within the first 10 minutes, I'm going to crack a joke about sobriety or alcohol. And I hope that it makes you feel comfortable in that honesty, that it's something that we can talk about. I went down to Disney a couple of weeks ago. A buddy was in town and his brother was there, and with his family and his wife and his girls, they were heading back to the hotel, and we were sitting around CityWorks, and he just started asking me some questions, and again, being very, very nice about it. He said, I don't want to offend you, or I don't want to pry too deep. And I'm like, dude, ask away, because I hope that now my honesty, I hope that my scars have the opportunity to help somebody else that's struggling.
Yeah.
Because the biggest thing in sobriety that has helped me is knowing I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And that's thanks to other people being honest, and that's thanks to the books that I've picked up and read. My brother, who is an author of 3 books now, he has said for every single one, he wrote the book that he wanted to read, the book that he wanted to go to the store and pick off the shelf. Yeah. And that's what I've tried to do with this, is to write something that I wish I had 10 years ago, because I hope that it shows people they're not alone.
Yeah.
That, the scars are going to be there for all of us. The scars are going to be worth it. And you get to look back at them. You get to look at where you are now and how far you've come. And that's why I think, I Want It is it's such a soundtrack. It's the one that I close the book with, because I really do think that those lines are just that important.
Yeah. And I love what you just said. It's a journey, and people aren't alone. Like anybody that's listening to this or watching this and feeling like it's just me, they need to know it's not. So I kind of have a couple questions that I want to ask you that I hope will be an encouragement to those that are listening and or watching. What are some tiny routines that help you live sober? Ones that you want people, like, I don't care how simple they are. If they've helped you, they will help someone else. So what are some tiny routines that you put into practice that you're like, this helps me not fall off the truck or wagon?
Yeah. So each morning, so I love routines, but I don't always love timing routines. Like, I need to have kind of my space to do it. So I'm not very strict where I say, all right, I'm going to wake up at 7. At 7:02, I have to meditate for 15 minutes. And at 7:45, I'm going to read for I'm not that type. So sometimes I'll find those throughout my day. One thing that I've implemented is I do read every day. And I try and read some sort of piece of literature that has to do with sobriety or alcoholism or whatever it may be. So that is one thing that I find time each day. A lot of times, it is at night. I take a bubble bath before I go to bed and I read.
Nice.
And that's my me time. That's my put my phone away. Don't stare at it and read and take that time. A lot of my routine in the morning comes from serving others. So it's getting up each morning when I know that Rhonda has to get ready and she has to go off she has to leave the house. I get to work from home and she's got to go work a 12-hour day on her feet doing hair Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So those are the mornings that I see how I can be of service. So I get up, I let the dogs out. I make her coffee and I bring it to her while she's getting ready. I feed the cats. I have the time that I say, all right, I got to check on one kid. I got to check on another. I make sure that they're getting out. Somewhere in between there, I read a daily reflection and I make sure to pray every morning and every night. Prayer, again, I didn't grow up on religion. I didn't grow up going to church. The first church that I ever attended was when I moved to Florida, and it was a First Baptist church, which was a very surprising moment for someone who had never been to a church to go to the giant First Baptist church in downtown Jacksonville. Right. So, prayer for me used to be about needing something like, my prayers were at 3 a.m. and it was like, God help me with my drinking, whatever it may be, or it's, God, I'm a big Duke men's basketball fan. It's God, let Duke win tonight. It was like those things. They were selfish prayers. And now they're not. Now I basically pray that he gives me the will and the grace to be the person I need to be honest, to be honest with myself, but also be honest with others, because that's where it starts. The honesty has to start with yourself.
Yeah.
And the moment I was able to tell myself, Jeremy, you're an alcoholic, opens it up for me to say that out loud to other people. So it's those tiny types of routines that help me. And then if I have the moments that I start to feel that pull backwards, I find something busy to do.
Yeah.
I spent the first 6 months, building a lot of Lego sets, again, listening to a lot of music, going on walks. If I start to feel that pull, we have community mailboxes in our neighborhood. So it's a little of a distance that I can walk and say, hey, around that sweet spot in the afternoon, evening, where, the beautiful Florida sun's starting to set and it's 75 degrees out. Yep. And that's the moment you want to sit on the back porch and have a drink. I'm going to walk to the mail and I'm going to intentionally do it during that time so that I can take myself out of that.
Yeah.
So it's finding those little things that work for me personally.
I love that. What joys or passions did you rediscover once you stopped numbing?
Cooking.
Ooh.
I love cooking and I had gotten into it a lot, but I think it was one of those things where it was always attached to a drink in hand. And so I started, it was one of the, it got to the point where, if you came to my house, if I said, Zach, come on over Saturday, we're going to hang out. I'm going to grill or I'm going to cook something. Well, sorry, Zach, you're probably not eating until 9 p.m. because I'm going to put as much drinking in front of cooking as I can.
Yeah.
To the point where it would get to that time that I just wouldn't cook. We'd order something. I'd do something simple. I wasn't enjoying it anymore.
Yeah.
And so I got back into trying to cook as little as it may be. Sometimes it's making something simple like a quesadilla. Sometimes it's making full meals. I really enjoy trying to recreate maybe a Disney dish that we just had, especially when we come back from one of Epcot's festivals. So that was something that I really, really have enjoyed getting back into. And I've figured out that way to do it now without feeling the need of alcohol. That, and I love Legos. I don't get to do them enough because obviously they're so expensive.
Yeah.
But even then, what became a routine when I got a Lego set is I would not do more than one bag a night.
Okay.
I would, because otherwise I would just sit and I'd be done in like an hour and then I'm done.
Yeah.
So if I've got a Lego set that's 6 bags, I know it's going to take me 6 evenings. And I also got into vinyls. Nice. So about 3 or 4 months ago, I've started buying vinyls a lot. Bought a record player, found an old system that I had that I hooked it up to and all this good stuff. So what I would find in the evening is I would get my one bag of Legos. I'd get myself like a flavored water or whatever. I've really enjoyed Liquid Death. They've got some great flavors of water. And I would sit with my one bag and I would drop the needle on a record that I had.
I love it.
And I would just sit there myself and put together that Lego set.
Yeah.
And I knew I had at least 5 or 6 nights or however many bags worth. And then I've gotten to where I maybe do about a set a month, but again, man, those things are so expensive.
Yeah.
Like I can't trade spending all my money on alcohol to spending all my money on Legos. So it's got to be some sort of middle ground, I feel like. But yeah, those are the things that I've really rediscovered and absolutely love.
I love that. You said vinyl. You can see over my shoulder, I've got a ton of vinyl, and there's something about it. Like
I love it.
I say MP3 is espresso and vinyl is like tea. It takes time. You let it do its thing. It blooms and you're not just selecting through. It's an experience. Oh, I'm about it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Cause if I put on a Spotify playlist, I'm going to hit that skip button way too many times.
Song won't even finish.
Right. Yeah. And let's get through it. Yeah. Yep. Or even if there's 30 seconds left, I'm like, let's get on to the next one.
Yep.
And yeah, with the vinyl, again, I only have to make one decision, and that's which vinyl to pick out.
Yeah.
And then from there, I got 30, 45, 50 minutes of whatever it is. And I've rediscovered music.
Yeah.
I just picked up Nirvana's Nevermind. Right. And I put that on this morning because that's one of the things I do now too. Every morning that I wake up while I'm fixing the coffee, while I'm doing the dogs and the cats and getting the kids up, I'm putting on a vinyl.
I love it.
And man, I put on Nevermind this morning and I'm like, holy moly, this album from beginning to end is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the past 20 years, all I've heard is what I put in some playlist, what Spotify decided were the good tracks from there.
Yep.
Or what maybe comes on the radio, and that's Teen Spirit and Come As You Are, maybe. And these other tracks start playing and I'm like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And it's been really cool. I love it. I definitely, I go into everything hard. So I've purchased way, way too many vinyls in the past couple months, but now it's like, that's something I have to apply. Like, all right. Yeah. What helped me get sober will hopefully help me not buy vinyls every week. So we'll get to that at some point.
Well, stay off eBay. That's where you get in trouble.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I've got 2 on the way.
What was the hardest belief that you had to unlearn?
I don't know if this counts, but that I didn't matter. I truly got to the point where I felt that way, that I didn't matter to other people. And it's something I'm still dealing with. I've got imposter syndrome.
Raise your hand, folks. We've all got it.
Right. Yeah. And it's really hard for me to get rid of that belief that like people like me and like, that's okay. There was somebody recently that I remember just coming home and looking at Rhonda and she's like, hey, how was tonight? And I was like, it was good, but I don't think so-and-so likes me. And she's like, why? And I'm like, well, this, and I start picking it apart and I start finding every reason to think this person might not like me. But what I found was this has nothing to do with him. It's everything to do with me.
Yeah.
Because simple fact is he doesn't care about me in that sense. He doesn't care what hat I wore, but I'm overthinking every decision of what I'm wearing and how I'm acting and how maybe my hands are placed. And do I run the same sentence through my head 100 times before I say it out loud because I don't want to be embarrassed by it. And I finally got to a point and let go of that belief in a sense of like, you know what? I'm the only one making a big deal out of this. Nobody else is. And as soon as I let that guard down and I just accepted that, hey, this is who I am. If they don't like it, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't have to care. But what I found is they do like it. And I remember coming back like a couple of weeks later and I looked around. She's like, how was tonight? And I was like, I think he does like me. It's like, I told you, and so it's just, it's starting to realize that, but the self-confidence and everything that I feel like I've gotten, I still need the validation. Sure. We all do, right? Everybody still wants a little pat on the back every now and then, but I don't crave it the way I used to. And I don't let it, tell myself who I am.
Yeah.
I am happy in the fact that this is Jeremy. This is me now. I'm finally living as the person that I think I was meant to be, before I dove deep into alcohol. And for a while there, that spread of first getting sober, I had no clue who I was because I had to unlearn everything. everything I knew was different. I had to look at the people. I had to look at the places. I had to look at everything I did and say, do I even like this without alcohol? And now I've gotten to a point where I know who I truly am. I know what my life is meant to be at this moment. Again, everything can change, but I'm confident and I'm comfortable in that fact. And that's just been such a game changer for me.
I love it. Well, to quote you, back to you, clarity doesn't come from turning the volume down. It comes from finally hearing yourself and deciding you're worth playing loud. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Jeremy Stein, the book is Still Loud, Now Clear. Tell them about it. Tell them where they can find you. Tell them about all the cool stuff that our listeners, our friends can participate in everything that is Jeremy Stein.
Yeah. So I'll give a podcast shout out for Main Street Magic. If you are a Disney fan or just a fan of a married couple for 20 years talking about their favorite place in general, you go to mainstmagic.com, and then we are Main ST Magic on most of the major social channels, 2 episodes a week, Tuesday and Friday on all the major platforms. And then Still Loud, Now Clear, March 10th. You will be able to go to stillloudnowclear.com and purchase it directly from my site. I'm having it printed and distributed by the wonderful, wonderful folks at lulu.com.
Nice.
That's not a paid advertisement. They're just awesome. And so I that's where you'll be able to get it. I am looking at some of the global distribution, for Amazon and all, just to reach a broader audience. But if you go to Still Loud Now Clear, you'll be able to purchase the book starting March 10th. Right now I do a monthly blog that a lot of times is an extension of the book, but I'm going to try and start doing that more often once the book is kind of off my desk, because my whole life has been involved in this. Yeah. And then it's Louder Now Clear at Instagram, Facebook, as well as I still call it Twitter, and I probably always will call it that. But Louder Now Clear on those. I post daily reels, either with thoughts. I do some with lyrics, and their meaning behind it. I'm starting to work on doing some things. There's lyric drops is what we call them throughout the book. Yeah. And so I'm starting to do some of that with some of my favorite songs from the book and kind of what they mean to me. And then lots of just cool lyrics and quotes from musicians and stuff I put out on those social channels as well. So just whatever it is to give you that extra edge, or hopefully show you that you are not alone in whatever you may be struggling with, and it doesn't have to be alcohol. It doesn't have to be drugs. I mean, to be honest, because that's what my life is now, I'm struggling with weight right now. I've gained like 25 pounds since I got sober, which again, everything you see in TV and movies, that's the opposite direction you're supposed to go. But I'm now sitting and saying, you know what, this is something I'm struggling with. Yeah. And I need to look at the way that I'm eating, the way that I'm doing things, the way that I am exercising or doing my life. And now I have to look at kind of almost a different type of addiction. So, I hope that the book, the social channels, I hope that they can help folks in any area of their life. And the book's not just for someone struggling with addiction. I want it to be for those who might know or love someone that they think is struggling, because this was the best way that I could figure out for my own family and my own friends to understand, my struggle and my addiction. And so I hope that this is something, because, over 2 years ago, because I celebrate 2 years on March 10th. So that's the reason the book's coming out then, over 2 years ago, every time that I drank, it was met with anger from Rhonda and the kids and close friends and family. And now I think it gives them an opportunity to understand what was going on inside my mind, kind of the mind of an addict. And I hope it can do that for some other folks as well, so that they can hopefully understand that person they love, that they just can't figure out why they can't dig themselves out of that hole. So stillloudnowclear.com. I hope you'll pick up a copy.
Yeah, man, Jeremy, thank you so much. Just thank you for your just authenticity, your vulnerability. This has been beautiful. And I know that so many people are going to benefit from hopefully this podcast, but I know your book.
Thank you, Zach, man. This has been wonderful. I love having these types of conversations. You're the best, and I appreciate you.
You bet. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Jeremy Stein, for coming on the show. Jeremy's book, Still Loud, Now Clear, can be found on his website, stillloudnowclear.com. I've placed a link in the show notes. I also want to thank you, my friend and listener, for taking some time with me. If you're enjoying the stories you hear on the show and would like to continue the conversation, you can sign up for my email newsletter. Just click the link in the show notes. The Zach Brown Show is hosted and produced by me, Zach Brown. It is engineered and co-produced by Corey Jess and is part of the Zach Brown Network. Our album art is by Luis Lopez. Our catchy outro music is Nurse by Corey Jess. You can listen to the full song on Spotify and iTunes. Follow The Zach Brown Show on Facebook and Instagram. And finally, you can help support the show by signing up to be a Patreon member. Memberships start as low as $5 a month with perks like buttons, stickers, sneak peeks at upcoming projects, and even an exclusive shirt. Sign up right now at patreon.com/The Zach Brown Show. That's all for this episode. I hope you come back for the next one. Until then, take care.